Mark is an Emmy Award-winning producer and executive at Rolling Pictures. His recent productions include Space Oddity by Kara Sedgwick and starring Kevin Bacon and Alexandra Speake. He's also produced As They Made Us, the editorial debut of Mayim Bialik, starring Dustin Hoffman, Rare Objects, directed and starring Katie Holmes and Alan Cumming, and the documentary film Up to Snuff. And Mark has been producing for many years, and his work in television includes producing critically acclaimed programs that you can see on ABC, CBS, CNN, Discovery, MSNBC, NBC, and PBS. Among other roles, Mark also served on the National Board of Directors of the Producers Guild of America, co-chaired the PGA Capital, and is a national member of the Television Academy. And he also serves on the board of Women in Film and Video. Thank you. We also have Paul Beckett, who is a senior editor at The Atlantic and veteran journalist with more than 25 years at the Wall Street Journal. He played a leading role in the international campaign to secure the release of Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who was wrongfully detained in Russia. And that effort drew international attention to press freedom. We have also Leland Schwartz, who is here to moderate with the National Press Club. He's been a journalist in Washington, D.C. for more than 30 years and built the State News Service, which covered state and local news in Washington for a newspaper across the United States. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for leading, I'm sure, a very interesting discussion.
Thank you, Letitia. Appreciate it.
I've got questions for you both. Mark, what drew you to Anna's story, and what do you feel audiences most need to understand about her today?
Yeah, I think this issue is an important one, and I think it's one that isn't talked about enough. When someone shared the screenplay with me and asked for my help in telling this story, I was not aware. I'm familiar with Daniel Pearl. There are certain names, Khashoggi, there are names that you know. But when I found out that more than 1,500 journalists have been killed since the start of this century while pursuing a story, that was just staggering. I was shocked that I was unaware of the dangers that journalists face and the pressures that they're under and these life and death consequences for speaking truth to power or putting yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time pursuing a story. So this is more than just a film. Some of the other films that Letitia mentioned are wonderful films, and I hope you go see all of them. But this is a story that I felt was important and should be hopefully a conversation starter. I hope everyone here that's seen the film and has been moved by something that you've seen will talk to someone else about this movie that you saw with that guy from White Lotus or the dude from Harry Potter or Game of Thrones or whatnot, and share this topic. I mean, I think that this is the type of story that deserves to be told. And Anna was killed 20 years ago, and I think these subjects that this film raises with the pressures and dangers that journalists face are just as relevant today as they were 20 years ago. So,
Paul, during your time as assistant editor at the Wall Street Journal, you were involved in all the efforts to free Evan Gershkovich. Can you share what that experience revealed about the risks journalism faces today and the global effort required to protect them?
Sure. First of all, thank you to everybody who's come out tonight for watching this movie and not the Met Gala. So you should all much appreciated and a much better use of your time. I think the thing that made Evan's detention in Moscow so resonant was the ease with which the Russians could just pick him up and detain him, pull him out of a restaurant, rough him up, put him in prison for a year and a half. And it's one journalist for one news institution, but in terms of how you think about these things, anything anybody like Anna, anybody like Evan, anybody about any of the people that you read overseas that this happens to, that is the moment that we have to stand up and say, this can't stand, because if we do nothing about this, what will we do when it comes here? What will it take for us to stand up and say, enough of this, freedom of the press is so fundamentally important that we have to support it. And so that was, I think, all of these cases, and you see far, far too many of them. You've seen them since the start of the war in Iran. I was just telling these guys before we came in, I don't know if the name Shelley Kittleson will mean anything to you, but she was a freelance reporter in Iraq who was kidnapped about 2 weeks ago. Very, very fortunately released, but she was kidnapped by basically Hezbollah in Iraq. And the US government, to its great credit, facilitated her release. Well, she flew back here, and the first time I met her was when we were both fleeing the ballroom at the White House Correspondents' Dinner at the Hilton a week and a half ago, and I was like, this poor woman has had the worst months of her entire life to be kidnapped in one continent, come here, and then face what was, in effect, an attack on the institution of the free press, in addition to the suspects, alleged targets of the president and his cabinet. So it does matter, and it does matter. It should, I hope, especially after seeing this wonderful movie, matter to everybody in this room.
Can you tell us a little about the elements that actually got Evan Gershkovich freed? The pressure.
Yeah, I mean, this is one thing where I think both President Biden and President Trump have actually been good about getting Americans back, and they've actually been pretty good about getting reporters back. And our job at the Wall Street Journal at the time was really just to keep the pressure on the Biden administration to do what had to be done to get our reporter home. And it's incredibly inconvenient. I mean, the US and Russia were in a proxy war in Ukraine, and yet, to the United States' great credit, and the great credit of the United States government, they went to bat for a single individual who was so wrongfully detained and was headed to a really terrible experience in Russian prison, and they went to bat for that. And Joe Biden made a big difference. We reported on all this, but Joe Biden made it a personal cause. He met with Evan's parents a couple of times, actually at White House Correspondents' Association dinners in the same hotel where we were a couple of weeks ago. And there was an assassin in Germany that Russia wanted back. Chancellor Scholz at the time said there was one person on earth that he would have gone to all the political trouble to release this assassin for, and that person was Joe Biden. Right? So Biden Biden put a lot of himself into it. On the afternoon that Biden quit the presidential race, he made a key call to the Prime Minister of Slovenia and said, you have to give up these 2 Russian assassins that you have in order to free the people, the Americans that we want back from Moscow. So there was a huge amount of the US government makes these things happen. We were delighted, not just obviously that Evan came home, but that Alsu Kurmasheva from Radio Free Europe came home, that Paul Whelan came home, who had been there for 5 or 6 years by that point, and 16 political dissidents. And it was a good marker of what it means to be American versus what it means to be Russia under Vladimir Putin, that we got out a journalist, 2 journalists, a former Marine who had been there for 6 years, and a whole bunch of pro-democracy dissidents. And all Russia wanted back from anywhere in the world were KGB assassins.
Mark, how did you approach telling this story rooted in real danger and loss while making it accessible to a broad audience?
Yeah, we wanted We wanted to tell an authentic story. You know, this is a dramatization. This isn't a documentary. It's a narrative film. But Anna was a real person. We have her words. We know what she stood for, and we wanted to tell this in an authentic way. We couldn't film it in Russia, so we filmed it in Latvia because it looked very authentic. You know, there were buildings built by Stalin in our film, and places that felt very authentically Russia. But then also we didn't want this to just be, you know, a biopic about a journalist who, you know, spoke truth to power. She was also a wife and a mother and a citizen, and so we wanted to show the broader aspects of her as well. So I think our approach to how do we tell this story in a way that's authentic and hopefully that people can relate to is by showing the complete picture of who Anna was, or at least, you know, to the extent that we were capable of in this film. So. And I think that resonated with her family. Her sister, after seeing the film, commented on how beautifully we captured the essence that was her sister Anna. Her one criticism of the film, and I'm very proud of this, is that it was cold the whole time, and she said, "We have 4 seasons in Russia, so you're short-selling Russia." Because we filmed it in Latvia and we filmed it during a 3-month period, it was cold the whole time we were there. So that was authentic cold that you were seeing. So.
Did you ever feel nervous or afraid the whole time you were involved with the movie?
Yeah, so we were within 50 miles of the Russian border, and for the scene where we were recreating the Opera House hostage situation, we'd originally planned that where, you know, we were going to have a big staging area in the parking lot for the command center and the commandos coming in and people in Russian uniforms and Russian signage, and we were going to turn that into this opera house in Moscow where that siege really did happen. And we worked closely with the Latvian government. The Russian embassy was across the street from that, and we were very aware of that. And their concern was that if anyone at the embassy picked up a cell phone and filmed video of Russian troops or Russian uniforms in Russian vehicles with Russian license plates storming a building, that could somehow be used by Putin to send in real Russian troops to quell the unrest happening in Riga. And so for that reason, we had to change our whole approach to how we told very public scenes of the story like that. So none of the signage that you saw in the movie was actually there. We had to composite all that in through movie magic. None of the license plates were there. We ended up putting the command center in a different place where it wouldn't be visible from the Russian embassy. So we try to be very thoughtful with how we told the story to ensure the safety of the people involved, because, you know, we were filming this in 2022 and 2023, and Russia was very much being an aggressor in Ukraine and elsewhere in the world, and we certainly did not want to create an incident that would have endangered anyone involved in the film or anyone else. So,
what was contact with the locals like?
They were overall very supportive. I mean, Anna Politkovskaya may not be well known here, but she's well known throughout the rest of the world. And even this weekend on Saturday, I turned on CNN and they had a whole news package on Anna Politkovskaya because yesterday was World Press Freedom Day, and she was a big part of that story and their coverage of that issue. So, you know, in the rest of the world, the city of Hamburg, Germany has a square named after her, and other towns have, you know, different tributes to her. So she is known and remembered, and the Latvian authorities were incredibly supportive and appreciative that we were trying to tell her story, because it's a story worth sharing. She had great courage to do what she did, and, you know, she was poisoned, and that didn't stop her. She was detained and beaten. We didn't even show the extent of what she endured. We kind of glossed over it, but she showed great courage in the face of great danger to continue speaking on behalf of the people and speaking truth to power in a country that does not allow freedom of speech or a free press. And so, yeah, she was really just a remarkable person.
Paul, you're a journalist. What felt authentic or familiar? And how did journalists navigate the dangers of speaking truth to power now?
I think it's a wonderful journalism movie. I mean, I think it is resonant in the same ways that the journalistic classics like Hold the President's Man or You're Living Dangerously it has an authenticity about practicing journalism. There were a few lines I was watching earlier that really jumped out to me. I mean, how is going to a war zone ever a great idea? That will have been true for journalists for century and a half, who then all went off to war, and tragically many of them died. But it's not getting any safer. One thing I noticed from this movie that I don't think would happen today is the fact that she went into Chechnya with a blue helmet and a press badge on. Blue helmet and a press badge, especially the press badge, is a target now, and has been a target in the last couple of years. So, there are things that change, mostly for the worse. I think are there any editors in the room? You can tell me, I'm an editor as well. I saw a couple of hands out. Okay, so I bet you all, the bit where which editor hasn't felt like this when they say, now remember, you work for the institution doesn't work for you, but that one just jumped out at me because I'm an editor. But it is the dangers are very real. And there's wonderful moments where Anna is there and she's gone through all this trouble to get to where she's going, and she's pushed everybody aside, and then she's standing and she's just like, will anybody talk to me? Anybody? I mean, that's what war reporting's like. You don't get through all the difficult parts and then have people run up and tell you their story, and how delighted they are to see you. It's still incredibly hard to do the work, but incredibly valuable. I mean, the other line there is when the editor of the paper says, because just to have, we're talking about Gorbachev starting the paper, and they say one source of honest reporting. I mean, that, again, there's these sort of, congratulations, there's these sort of iconic lines through the whole movie where if you're a journalist, you're like, yes. I mean, and none of it, you can't, we're beyond the point, I think, where people look at it in a romanticized way. They just look at it in a necessary way. I think a lot of the romance has gone out of war reporting, and now it's just plain dangerous, and thank goodness people still go in and do it.
For those of you that didn't hear, Paul Beckett loves this movie. I just want to go on record and spread the word.
Do you have any explanation as to why that newspaper was allowed to stay alive? And you would think they go way beyond.
Yeah, we didn't. We touched on it very briefly in the film, just the dangers that paper faced. There was a scene where the great Kieran Hines, who played Dmitri, who was the editor, said, "They never come for me, they just come for my reporters." In real life, Anna was one of 7 journalists from that newspaper that had been killed. Dmitri, the man in real life who was her editor, in 2021 was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his work at that paper, being a voice of truth inside Russia where there is no free press. He ended up fleeing Russia. That paper moved to Latvia and operated in Latvia after the war in Ukraine started. And when that war started, Dmitri, the person, took his Nobel Prize and auctioned it off to help the people of Ukraine that were affected by Russia's invasion, and raised and donated more than $102 million to the people of Ukraine by selling his Nobel Prize, for their benefit, to help families and children who have been displaced by the Russian aggression in that country. So, he's a remarkable man. That newspaper, which we alluded was set up by Gorbachev with his Nobel Peace Prize money, to be a voice of truth inside Russia. And to the question of how could they continue to operate, 7 of their journalists were killed. I'm not sure that Russia was trying to allow them to continue to operate. I think they were trying to intimidate them, and to the extent that they could. And this was just a group of people that had the courage to not be silenced.
Has anything changed over your lifetime as an editor, or is it just the same thing going on?
Well, remarkably, the thing that has changed is the amount of safety precautions and protocols that we've put in place, and we started that at the Wall Street Journal after Danny Pearl, who was killed in Pakistan about 4 years before Anna, and for all the incredible planning and the security concerns and risks that we assess. That has changed, the amount that we put into it, and then it happens anyway.
Could you describe some of the protocol?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason we knew that Evan was missing is he had missed 2 check-ins because he was on a twice-a-day check-in with his editor, and as soon as he missed the second one, we had at the Wall Street Journal a whole security apparatus that kicks into gear and tries to figure out what went wrong. So yes, there's a lot, but none of what we did stopped him from being taken.
If I can add, there's an organization called the Committee to Protect Journalists that tracks, the attacks on journalists and keep track of who's been killed and where and when. And they reported that last year was the most dangerous year for journalists since they started keeping track of this stuff. So in all the decades that they've been tracking, I think 125 journalists were killed last year, which was the most killed since they started tracking. The problem's getting worse, it's not better, I guess. We should also, I want a lot of time for some audience questions too, Leland, so.
Well, let's ask them to ask you questions after this one. What's the responsibility for filmmakers and journalists to tell the stories that involve political conflict or risk? What is the responsibility of the filmmakers to do that?
I think filmmakers should have the same courage that the journalists have to tell the hard stories. If you look at movies like All the President's Men, you look at movies like Spotlight that really expose the role that journalists played in the whole Catholic Church scandal. I feel like those, or Silkwood, I mean, there's so many examples of really powerful stories that have really, I think, have an important message for audiences. So, there are films that entertain you, there's films that scare you, there's films that make you fall in love, and there's films that make you think. And I feel like these are the types of stories that hopefully, make people think and experience things or see the world in a way, or some of the issues that we're dealing with in this world in a way that you might not otherwise see in your daily lives. And so I think there's an important role that the visual arts play. And I think it could be a transformative role. I really believe in the power of the visual arts to spark conversations and raise awareness and help elevate subjects that are worthy of a healthy, robust public discourse. So.
How'd you like to take questions from?
There's someone with a microphone there, and I'm happy to run my mic around as well too. So since you're closest, I'll hand this to you.
Hello, good evening, gentlemen. I have 2 questions, so I'll just move quickly. Thank you for being here. I'm the first to admit I am a washed-up journalism major, and I'm also the first to admit that I don't work in journalism, and I have fewer and fewer friends who work in journalism because of name the threat. There are so many. So, Paul, my question to you is, what is the greatest threat to journalism today? Choose one, and how can we combat it? And then a question for everyone up there. Any words or stories of motivation for the storytellers out here that keep you going? Thank you.
The greatest threat is apathy. And people saying, oh, news is also bad, I start reading it. Because if that's the easily is a lack of relevance or a lack of currency. What was the second part?
How do we combat that?
Well, I mean, I think it's incumbent. I do think the journalism industry needs to figure that out. I don't put it all on the people who we would hope would be consuming the journalism. If the journalism industry can't figure out how to provide journalism, good journalism, fact-based journalism, in-depth journalism, in a manner in which people want to receive it, then like any other business, it's going to have a very, very hard time, right? So there's a lot the journalism industry can do. I think what we would ask as an industry is please just care about the facts and go somewhere where you can get the facts. And that is a very good baseline on which to start. And just think what it means in your life. If you didn't have journalism, what would you know? Literally, what would you know every day about what's going on either in your community, in your country, in the world? If it didn't exist and you thought you were entirely dependent on missives from the government that the government wanted you to read, how would your life be different?
The other way is to make more movies like Anna.
Other questions?
Okay, I have a big mouth.
There you go.
Hello.
There you go.
Okay, so this is a row of filmmakers. So, Mark, first of all, thank you for making this. I mean, really. I remember reading the story about Anna years and years and years ago. I don't know if it was the New York Times, whatever, and saying, oh my God, this is a movie. This is important. So what I want to know is, when did you get the script? How did you know it was important? How did you put it together? I mean, the deals. How'd you get people who had the balls to give you the money to do it? And how are you going to market it?
Great questions. Excuse my music. So a friend of mine in the UK is a producer who had saved the obituary when Anna was first killed. And so she's the one that found the screenwriter in LA that ended up writing the screenplay. So, she developed that and brought me the screenplay. In terms of financing my film, Rolling Pictures, we are always looking for very compelling stories, and so we helped, put together the financing and the production resources to get this into production, and then ultimately get it sold to distributors and out. And in terms of the cast, it's a very British cast. We Jason Isaacs and Ian Hart, who were both in Harry Potter, and Kieran Hines, who was in Game of Thrones and other things. And then Maxine Peake, who was just perfect for Anna. I mean, she was so, she so perfectly portrayed Anna. So we were thrilled to get the cast that we got. We filmed it in a place that felt very authentic. We had an amazing crew that worked really hard to get the details right, and ended up with the story that you saw. So, and then, I'm sorry?
How many years?
So the story was finished in 2021. We started filming in 2022. We finished filming in 2023. By 2024, we had sold the film, and it was released in 2025. So it's a process for sure. And I'm very grateful to my partners in Rolling Pictures and the executive producers on this film who helped make this story possible. It's sometimes hard to tell dramas, and this is a drama about a Russian woman being told by British actors. So that's a tougher sell than the movie I did with Kevin Bacon or with Dustin Hoffman. That was an easier conversation. But to their credit, the names you see in the credits as executive producers on this, from Sean Penn on down, really were hugely supportive at helping us get this film made and get it out into the world. And the film's now available in 64 countries. Here you can find it on Amazon and Apple and Tubi and elsewhere. I'm not sure where else, but it's also available in 64 countries, not in Russia. That is not one of the 64. But thank you for the question.
Anna's portrayed, the actress who plays her is terrific. She's portrayed as a very virtuous woman from every standpoint, but she was putting her family and her loved ones in enormous jeopardy. I mean, and that is not really, she's not as virtuous in that way as perhaps the movie portrays her. I don't know. That's not a question, it's a comment. But
yeah, that's a fair comment. And we tried to show some of that tension that her choices created with her children or with her husband. I mean, this is not, this happy family, and she'd go off and be a journalist and come back in their happy family. There was tension. There was strife. Her marriage fell apart during all of this. At the end of the film, she was inviting him to come to dinner because they were no longer together. This is all very true to real life. Her family unit dissolved because she was so focused on being a voice of truth and would not back down from that. And so it affected her relationships with her family and her husband and I'm sure others. And so I think your point is valid. I think anyone who was willing to take a stand like that and really put everything into something they believe or sometimes sacrificing in other aspects of their life or putting other people at risk as a result. I think there are the families of more than 1,500 journalists that would tell you the exact same thing because they've lost loved ones as a result of their family members' commitment to pursuing a story. So, in the back.
Hello, I'm Lisa Durden from New Jersey. Yay!
Hi, Lisa.
I wanted to ask a question. I actually am a filmmaker as well, but I began as a journalist. So I went to Seton Hall University for journalism. I became a filmmaker years later by mistake because I was in front of the camera and I found out that by the time they finish editing it, you have no control over the narrative. So just by total distaste for what I was seeing in front of the camera, I thought, well, documentary filmmaking, how much of a stretch can that be? So then I became a filmmaker. I have a degree in filmmaking now from the School of Visual Arts, but I was a filmmaker before I got the extra degree. So my question becomes, on my journalism side, the young lady she was kind of mentoring and she gave her that opportunity, where is she? Does she carry the torch and the mantle of being the kind of journalist that is just going hard to make sure stories get told? I wonder what happened to her, the young lady.
Yeah, no, I believe in real life she did. She went on to herself be have a career in journalism and showed great courage, I believe, as well. And then for the actress who portrayed her, she's gone on. She plays Kate Moss in a new movie about Moss and something. Kate Moss and something. She's really blossoming and killing it herself in real life. But yeah, the woman that she portrayed, who Anna kind of mentored and brought up, that was based on a real person who kind of carried that mantle forward. So.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Maybe two more questions. So.
Probably don't need the mic. Just curious, was anybody ever held responsible for war crimes out of some of the reporting that?
Sure. So the question was, anyone ever held responsible for Anna's murder? At a certain point, Russia did an investigation and did say that there was a group of people that they believed were responsible for her death. That was the government saying it, and some people believe that it was the government that actually was responsible for her murder. So I'm not sure how much credibility that has. But at some point, the Russian government did say, oh, we found the people that are responsible. But even those people, then they turned around and let out of prison to go fight their war in Ukraine as they were emptying the prison. So even the people that they arrested, they ultimately released to go fight in the Russian army. But I'm not sure that everyone believes that those are the people that were truly responsible. So, one last question.
I'll go for it. I can go ahead and speak loudly. I know that you sold the picture, so it's possible you may not be able to answer this question, Ron, but were there any territories overseas, in particular, distributors in those territories that were like, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole out of fear?
Yeah, so that's a fair question. The question is, were there distributors that were wary of releasing this film because of the subject? I think that's true. I think domestically, there are U.S. distributors that were concerned. A few years back, there was a film that Seth Rogen and some others made called The Interview, where they made fun of the dictator in North Korea. And that was a Sony Pictures film. And there were hackers in Eastern Europe that targeted Sony Pictures and hacked Sony and released a ton of files, as well as that film in its entirety on the internet before it had been released, just to ensure that Sony could never profit from from the release of this film that made fun of Kim Jong-un, I guess it was. So that has not been forgotten by studio executives or distributors, and so I do think that was a factor in some of the pause that certain people had when we met with them to talk about this film, who were perhaps hacker averse and did not want to put a target on themselves. I think distributors in Europe had a lot more courage and stepped up much faster. But it was a lot of work, and this is also an independent film, so we don't have a big studio backing us, and those stories are always harder to kind of break through the noise. So, we had Neon and Bleecker Street and their joint venture Decal that partnered with us for the domestic release, and we're very appreciative for them stepping up and supporting this film. But this easily could have gone to one of 6 other names that you would know as well or better than those. And, a lot of those larger names were not enthusiastic about, being the company that released the film that said Putin's a bad person. And so for better, for worse, it was definitely a process. So, but thank you for that question. I'd like to thank, NYU for hosting us. I'd like to thank Letitia and French in Motion. I'd like to thank Leland and Paul for sharing their thoughts, and all of you for coming. So thank you so much. So, pleasure.